Ever feel like when it comes to the economy, like it's a whole different ball game out there? Like someone needs to like update the rule book.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, get ready to dive into this thing called the intangible economy we've been hearing about, where stuff you can't even like touch, software, patents, even a company's like reputation that's becoming the real deal.
It really is. What's so interesting is how we kind of sleepwalked into this, right? I mean, we used to think about wealth in terms of factories, things you could actually see and touch.
Right.
Now it's all about algorithms, data, ideas, things that are, well, intangible. The code behind Google's search engine, the design of a Tesla, that's where the real value lies today.
Yeah. It's like the economy went digital, but the way we measure it is like stuck in the Stone Age.
Hmm.
To help us wrap our heads around this, we are diving into Restarting the Future. That's by Jonathan Haskell and it's Dionne Westlake.
Great book.
And yeah, we've also got some really thought-provoking stuff from the Routledge Handbook of the Philosophy of Economics. Let me tell you, these authors, they don't hold back.
No, they don't. They really lay out this thing that's being called the great economic disappointment. Think about it. We have more technology, more innovation than ever before, but economic growth, well, it's been a bit sluggish, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, definitely.
And inequality, it seems like it just keeps growing.
Right.
It's a real puzzle, and these books argue it all comes back to this shift towards the intangible.
So it's not just that we're making different things now. It's like the very DNA of what we're making is changing the whole game. So for the longest time, investing in things, factories, machines, all that, that was the path to like economic success.
Right, tangible investments.
Exactly. And then boom, intangible investments take center stage, R&D, software, all the stuff you can't see that makes the digital world go round.
And for a while, it was like the goose that laid the golden egg. The internet, smartphones, all these game-changing innovations were fueled by massive investments in intangible assets.
But there's a but, right? Around the 2010s, things started to sputter a bit. The growth of intangible investment itself, it actually began to slow down. And that has a lot of economists, well, worried.
Yeah, understandably. Because if companies aren't investing as heavily in the very things that drive innovation and growth,
Yeah.
the whole economy starts to feel the pinch. We're talking stagnant wages, fewer jobs being created. It touches everyone.
Yeah, it's that the engine's sputtering just as we hit the on-ramp to this whole new economic reality.
Yeah.
And to make things even more complex, these intangible assets, they don't exactly play by the old rules. Like, take scalability, for example. You build a factory, you can only churn out so many widgets, right?
Right.
But software, that's a whole different ballgame. Copy it, distribute it at almost zero cost. Suddenly, the companies with a head start, they've got an advantage that's almost impossible to beat.
Exactly. This winner-takes-most dynamic, it's a hallmark of the intangible economy. Think about Google or Amazon. They're not dominating because of factories or physical resources.
Right.
It's the algorithms, the data, the sheer reach of their networks, all intangible assets that are incredibly hard to replicate.
Yeah, that makes sense. But doesn't that kind of like stifle competition? I mean, if the key to success is having the best algorithm, wouldn't that like discourage new companies from even trying?
That's a critical question. Some argue that this concentration of power in the hands of a few tech giants, it's a problem. It could stifle innovation, limit choices for consumers. Think about it. If one company controls the search results, what does that mean for the information we have access to?
Right.
If a handful of platforms dominate online shopping, are we really getting the best products, the best deals? These are real concerns.
It's like the digital equivalent of like a company town.
Right.
Except instead of being at the mercy of a big factory, it's an algorithm calling the shots. And speaking of location, it seems like this intangible boom, it's also changing the whole economic map. Certain cities are like pulling way ahead.
Absolutely. Intangible assets thrive on knowledge, on collaboration, on the kind of buzzing energy you find in cities. So places like San Francisco, New York, London, they're becoming these global magnets for intangible-driven industries. They're attracting the best and the brightest, sucking up investment like crazy.
But that leaves everyone else in the dust, right? If all the high-paying jobs, all the exciting new companies, if they're all concentrated in a few expensive cities, what happens to smaller towns, to rural areas?
That's the worry. It could lead to even greater geographic inequality. And as if that weren't enough, trying to finance intangible investments, that's a whole other minefield. Think about it. Banks love collateral, something solid they can seize if a loan goes south.
Right, they want to see some bricks and mortar.
Exactly. But how do you put a patent in a vault? How do you repossess an algorithm?
Right, it's like trying to get a mortgage for a cloud. The bank would laugh you out of the room.
Pretty much. And that creates a huge obstacle for businesses trying to break into the intangible economy, especially startups and smaller firms that don't have deep pockets. If banks won't lend them money for something they can't physically hold, it can really stifle innovation and limit their potential to grow.
So not only have the rules of the game changed, but the old playbook is practically useless.
Mhm.
And to make matters worse, it seems like the very institutions meant to keep things fair, the regulations, the laws, they're stuck in the past.
It's a classic case of institutions struggling to keep pace with technology. Take property rights, for example, the bedrock of any functioning economy. For tangible assets like land or buildings, it's fairly straightforward.
Right.
But when you're talking about algorithms, data, online reputations, it gets a lot murkier.
Because where do you even draw the line around an idea? How do you prove ownership of something that exists purely in the digital world? It's like fitting a square peg in a round hole.
It really is. And it's not just property rights. Think about how we finance businesses, how we think about competition and antitrust laws. All these systems were designed for a world dominated by tangible assets and production capacity.
So how do you apply those rules to a company like Google, where their power comes from algorithms and data? It's a totally different ballgame.
Exactly. And that's why some experts argue we need a serious rethink, a brand new rule book for the intangible economy.
Okay, I'm listening. What kind of new rules are we talking about?
Well, Haskell and Westlake, they've got some radical ideas. They say we need to overhaul our tax systems to incentivize intangible investments, rethink how we design our cities to support this new kind of growth, and maybe even find entirely new ways to measure economic progress in the age of the intangible.
So we're not talking about just tweaking the system. We're talking about a complete overhaul. That's a lot to digest.
It is a lot to process, and it gets even more interesting when you start to think about the philosophical implications of all this. Because if the way we currently measure economic success, if that's not capturing the true value of the intangible economy, then what does that mean for how we define progress itself?
Now that's a question I bet keeps some economists up at night.
It certainly keeps philosophers of economics busy. And that's where our deep dive into the Rutledge Handbook of the Philosophy of Economics comes in handy. For decades, we've relied on metrics like gross domestic product GDP, as you probably know it as the primary indicator of a country's economic well-being.
Yeah, GDP, you hear that number thrown around all the time.
Right, it's everywhere. But as we've been discussing, the intangible economy kind of throws a wrench in that whole system. How do you put a price tag on an idea? On a company's reputation, on the skills and knowledge of its workforce? These things, they don't exactly fit neatly into our traditional economic models.
It's like trying to, I don't know, measure the value of a sunset.
Yeah,
You know, it's beautiful, it's awe-inspiring, but how do you quantify that in dollars and cents?
exactly. And that's where things get really interesting. Because if our traditional economic indicators are missing the mark, if they're not capturing the true value of what's happening in the intangible economy, then what does that mean for the decisions we make, both individually and as a society?
Okay, that's a big question. It's like we're realizing our map of the economic world is missing, like entire continents of innovation and value creation.
And that realization, it has implications for all of us. If GDP isn't the be-all and end-all of economic progress, then what is? And how do we make sure our choices, our policies, reflect a more accurate and holistic understanding of what truly drives prosperity?
I think we've definitely stumbled upon more questions than answers so far. But
Yeah.
that's what makes this deep dive so interesting. We're starting to peel back the layers of the economic onion here. And what we're finding is a whole new world of complexity and possibility. It's like we've got this brand new super fast computer, but we're still trying to run it on like an old floppy disk.
Right.
But this isn't just some, theoretical econ stuff, this intangible economy. It's impacting all of us right here, right now.
Absolutely. This isn't just about how businesses operate or how governments measure growth. This is about you, about your skills, your career, your future.
Okay, so let's get down to brass tacks here. What does this all mean for the average person? How do we even begin to navigate this new reality, especially when it feels like the map's changing every day?
Well, one of the most important takeaways from restarting the future, and this is something anyone can take action on, is the idea of investing in your own intangible capital.
Intangible capital. Okay, that sounds a little abstract. Can you break that down for us?
Sure. In the past, you thought about your career, you thought about your education, your job title, how many years you'd been working.
Right.
Those are all important, of course. But in this new economy, it's your skills, your adaptability, your ability to learn new things. Those are the assets that really set you apart.
So it's not just what you know, it's like how you learn, how you adapt to new situations.
Precisely. Think about the skills that are in high demand today. Creativity, problem solving, critical thinking, the ability to communicate effectively, to collaborate with others. These aren't things you can automate. These are uniquely human skills, and they're the keys to thriving in a world where the only constant is change.
It's like the old saying, give a man a fish, feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish, feed him for a lifetime. Except now you've also got to teach him how to design a better fishing rod, how to navigate, like changing currents, maybe even build a website to sell his fish online.
That's a great analogy. And it highlights the importance of lifelong learning in this new world. The skills you learned in school, even in your first few jobs, they're not going to cut it forever. You've got to be constantly updating your skill set, picking up new things, learning how to use new technologies, new ways of working.
So no more resting on your laurels. Got to stay ahead of the curve, right? Be a lifelong learner.
Exactly. And that might seem daunting to some, but it's also incredibly empowering because it means you're in the driver's seat of your own career. You're not limited by those traditional career paths anymore. You can create your own opportunities, build your own path by developing the skills and knowledge that are most valuable in the marketplace.
So it's about being proactive, taking ownership of your own development, right? Recognizing that learning isn't something you check off your to-do list. It's an ongoing process.
Absolutely. And this actually ties back to what we were talking about earlier with how this intangible economy is changing where people live and work. Because if you're constantly investing in your own skills, your own knowledge base, you're less tied to any one specific location.
Right, because with remote work becoming so common, and the most valuable skills being those that can be used anywhere, it's like geography is becoming less important.
Precisely. And that creates both opportunities and challenges. On the one hand, you might not have to move to Silicon Valley or New York to find a great job in a cutting-edge field.
Yeah.
You can potentially live in a place that you love, that fits your lifestyle, and still participate in this global, intangible economy.
That's a huge shift from the old way of doing things, where you had to go where the jobs were, even if it meant giving up on other things you valued.
Exactly. But there's a flip side to this. Because those who are able to move to those big intangible hubs, the cities that are attracting the most talent and investment, they're probably still going to have an edge.
Because of those knowledge spillovers we were talking about. Like being surrounded by other talented people in your field that just naturally accelerates your own learning and growth.
Exactly. So it creates a sort of dilemma. Do you prioritize having access to the absolute best opportunities, even if it means making compromises on where you live? Or do you prioritize your lifestyle, your ideal living situation, and accept that there might be some trade-offs in terms of, career progression or earning potential?
That's a tough one. There's no easy answer to that. It's about really figuring out what's most important to you, right? Weighing your priorities.
And that's exactly why it's so important to understand these dynamics of the intangible economy. Because the more aware you are of these trends, of how this new reality is unfolding, the better equipped you'll be to make those decisions.
So knowledge is power, even or maybe especially in this intangible age.
Absolutely. The more you understand how this new system works, the better you'll be able to navigate it.
So we've talked a lot about the challenges of measuring economic success in a world where, the intangible is king. But are there other ways of looking at this? Are there any new metrics out there that might give us a more accurate picture of what's really going on?
That's a question that's causing a lot of debate right now.
Because just looking at GDP, that's like, what, judging a fish by its ability to climb a tree? It just doesn't make sense in this new context.
Exactly. It's like trying to assess a company's health just by looking at its bank balance. You're ignoring the brand value, the intellectual property, the morale of the employees, all these intangible things that are crucial to its long-term success.
Right. It's about the bigger picture.
And it's the same for a country as a whole. Just looking at GDP misses out on so much of what actually makes a society successful. Things like health outcomes, education levels, the quality of the environment, even things like happiness and social trust.
It's about recognizing that true prosperity, it's not just about how much money we're making. It's about the quality of our lives, the health of our planet, right?
Precisely. And while measuring those things can be tricky, it's essential if we want to create policies, make choices that lead to a future that's more than just economically prosperous, but also fairer, more just, more sustainable.
This is all very thought-provoking, but I got to be honest, it's a lot to process. It feels like we're going through this massive economic shift, And the old ways of thinking, they just don't apply anymore.
You're absolutely right. And it can feel overwhelming, but it's also incredibly exciting. Because as we grapple with these questions, as we challenge our assumptions about how the economy works and what truly matters, we have a chance to create something better, something that aligns with our values.
So it's not just about adapting to change, it's about shaping that change, steering it in the right direction.
Precisely. And that brings us back to the Routledge Handbook of the Philosophy of Economics. Because this isn't just an economic revolution, it's a philosophical one as well.
It's about questioning our assumptions, expanding our sense of what's possible, and ultimately creating a world where everyone has the chance to thrive.
And that's a goal worth striving for, wouldn't you say?
It's like we've been handed the keys to, I don't know, a self-driving car, but no one told us how to program the GPS.
That's a good way to put it.
Like, we know where we want to go, a better future for everyone,
Right.
right? More prosperity, more fairness, but the old maps, they just don't seem to work anymore.
And that brings me to the thought I want to leave you with today. We've spent this deep dive exploring how this intangible economy is changing everything, how businesses work, the skills we need, even how we measure progress. But maybe the most important question is this. If our entire economic system is having trouble adapting to this intangible world, what does that mean for the choices we're making in our own lives right now?
Okay, I see where you're going with this. It's about, like, connecting the dots,
Yeah.
right? Taking these big ideas and applying them to our own personal journeys.
Exactly. Think about it this way. If you were building a house today, you wouldn't use blueprints from 100 years ago, would you?
No way.
You wouldn't use outdated materials, outdated construction techniques. The whole thing needs to be built for the world we live in now.
Right, it's common sense. So you're saying that we need to approach our careers, the skills we develop, even where we choose to live all of that, with this intangible future in mind.
Exactly. Are you investing in skills that will still be relevant 10, 20 years down the line? Are you thinking about where you want to live, not just based on how it is now, but how it might evolve in this new knowledge-based economy? These are big questions, no doubt.
Yeah.
And there are no easy answers, but ignoring them altogether, well, that might be the biggest risk of all.
I have to admit, it's a little intimidating, like all this uncertainty. Feels like we're in one of those choose-your-own-adventure books, but the stakes are way higher.
It's definitely a lot to consider, but remember what we said. Knowledge is power. By understanding these trends, by thinking critically about how they might affect your own life, you're already ahead of the curve.
True enough. So no flying cars just yet, but it seems like this intangible revolution, it's shaping the future in ways we could never have imagined.
That's what makes economics so fascinating, don't you think? It's not just about numbers and graphs, it's about understanding the forces that shape our world and using that knowledge to make better decisions, both for ourselves and for everyone else.
Well, I feel a lot more informed after today's deep dive, that's for sure. Thanks for being such a great guide through this complex and ever-changing landscape.
My pleasure. It's always great to have these conversations.
And to all our listeners out there, we hope this deep dive has given you plenty to think about. The intangible economy is here, and the choices you make today will determine your path in this exciting new world. So stay curious, keep learning, and as always, happy diving.